Well, for the first time since 1960, the membership of the National Baseball Hall of Fame will remain frozen. No new members will be inducted. That doesn't seem to bother Curt Schilling, who in a lengthy letter to the Hall of Fame said that he also posted to Facebook. He asked to be removed from the writers' ballot next year. The controversial pitcher was named on 71% of the ballot, 16 votes shy of the minimum needed for selection. Schilling was followed by all-time home run leader Barry Bonds and 354 game winner Roger Clemens in the voting. Important note I want to make. There is a morals character clause in the current Hall of Fame voting. The commissioner at the time was Kennesaw Landis, the first MLB commissioner who made sure African Americans could not play Major League Baseball. So much for morality and character with that clause. MLB insider Jeff Passan joining us now. Jeff, great to have you with us, and I understand that you have a very strong position on the Hall of Fame. So I want to hear from you first. Is it a big deal to even get into the Hall of Fame at this point?
I think the fact, Molly, that the Hall of Fame was dominating trending topics on Twitter last night illustrates that it is still a big deal to people. And yet my personal position as someone who has voted in the Hall of Fame and who gave up his Hall of Fame vote because he thought that the entire process had been completely corrupted is that the Hall of Fame is a museum. The Hall of Fame exists to tell the history of baseball. And the history of baseball has all kinds of unsavory characters. It has warts, it has low moments, it has high moments. And the idea that Barry Bonds, arguably the greatest hitter since Babe Ruth, that Roger Clemens, one of the great pitchers of all time, and even Curt Schilling, who statistically is probably a borderline guy, but for me would have been in based on his on-field play alone. The fact that they're not going to be in there is whitewashing the history of baseball. And I hate that idea that people, that fans, that those who go to Cooperstown, New York aren't mature enough to walk into this building that is so full of sanctimony and say, this isn't some special miraculous place that got dropped by the baseball gods onto this little burg in New York. This is a museum, and museums are meant to tell us what have happened in the past, and what has happened in the past is ugly and is dirty and is complicated.
Go ahead, Max. The Hall of Fame's a very big deal. The Hall of Fame's a very big deal, as Jeff points out, whether you like it or not. It's a huge deal to get into the Hall of Fame. And let me just say this. The voting should be uncomplicated. In fact, just put me in charge. I have this whole thing figured out. It's really very simple. For those who would say anyone who's ever cheated is disqualified, that's ridiculous. Gaylord Perry, the spitter in me, right? Like, stop it. You guys threw spitballs and admitted it their whole career. They're in the Hall of Fame. Everyone, shut up about that. It's very, very simple. It's not that cheating disqualifies you. It's that if you cheated and it changed you, it can be demonstrated it changed you from something you weren't into something you became, and what that was a Hall of Famer, then you're not in the Hall of Fame. But if you were already a Hall of Famer when you cheated, then you are in the Hall of Fame. So Barry, like Mark McGwire and Sammy Sosa, should never get a whiff of the Hall of Fame, because without cheating, they would have never gotten close. Now, Barry Bonds, when he started in, was a first ballot Hall of Famer and a top 3 or 4 left fielder who ever lived. He's in the Hall of Fame. It's a no-brainer. Roger Clemens was a borderline Hall of Famer when all of a sudden he went to Toronto when he seemed to be declining and then won the pitching triple crown 2 years in a row and everything. But I think, so you want to say no to Roger Clemens? I think it's silly. I think Roger Clemens is also a Hall of Famer because he pitched quite a bit longer after that. At whatever level, he wasn't done with his career when he was already borderline. And Curt Schilling, if this is complicated for people, I don't know why. Whatever you think about his politics or irresponsible things he said or whatever, Curt Schilling was a runner-up Cy Young Award 3 times and a top 5 finisher another time. He struck out more than 300 guys 3 times. He was one of the best strikeout to walk ratios in his prime of all time. He won 20 games in an era where it was still not that easy to do multiple times. And not only that, if you think he was borderline, which he was, minus the postseason, then to ignore the most highly leveraged games there are is silly, and he's one of the greatest pressure pitchers who ever lived. In a long postseason career, where he had 13 decisions, went 11-2 with a sub-1 whip and almost a sub-2 ERA, barely over 2 ERA, he did that in the teeth of the steroids era. Teams he pitched for, largely because he pitched for them, won the World Series, more than one different franchise. Curt Schilling is obviously a Hall of Famer. So is Barry Bonds. And by the way, so is Roger Clemens. This ain't that hard.
It's not that hard. And let me tell you something else, too. Let me be very, very direct and clear. I don't like Curt Schilling a little bit. I don't like him at all. You look at some of the things that he says, the way that he acts, the people that he has said things about, including myself and others. My God, let me tell you something right now. The only thing that has stopped me from going after him is the fact that I work for the worldwide leader. Because ain't nobody scared of his sorry behind as a person. I don't like him a little bit. But I'm man enough to acknowledge this man is a Hall of Famer. There is no excuse. And Max, you threw out all the number. 300 strikeout seasons. The strikeout to walk ratio is top notch. I mean, this dude is like 5-0 all time in clutch situations in big time games. He's undefeated. You consider the way that he has performed. This Hall of Fame process is an absolute positive joke. And as classless as he can be, I'm certainly not going to reciprocate by exuding the same or displaying the same kind of classlessness that he has. Nothing that he does off the field should take away from what he has done on the field. What he has done on the field is Hall of Fame quality. He should be in the Hall of Fame. It's an absolute joke that he is not in the Hall of Fame. And what Molly pointed out at the very beginning with Judge Landis, the first commissioner of baseball, who played a significant role in keeping blacks from participating in the sport. How in the hell do you have a morals clause in a baseball Hall of Fame when the very start the starting process of all of this omitted blacks? How do you do that and then sit on a moral high ground and hold on to that for over a century now, for crying out loud? It is utterly ridiculous. It's hypocritical, and I want to applaud Jeff Passan for giving up his Hall of Fame vote and not wanting to be a part of this joke. And anybody who is a part of it, I'm not excoriating them, because the great Tim Kirkjian and others, listen, I understand what baseball means, but it's just an absolute disgrace what some, not all, but what some of these Hall of Fame voters do. It's an absolute disgrace. I have no use for it. Curt Schilling, no matter what you think about him, and I've already said what I think about him, no matter what you think about him, Curt Schilling is a Hall of Famer, and it's a travesty that he's not in.
Here's the problem with the morals clause, guys. The issue, it's not just the existence of the morals clause. It's the idea to me that it's not meted out in multiple directions. If you're going to have a morals clause in place, and you're going to say that somebody who has said racist things, or who has cheated, or who has done this or that is going to be dinged for it, there has to be a counterbalance in place where people who do good things get bumped up for it. You know, someone like Dale Murphy, who throughout the sport is seen as just an absolute prince and saint of a man, did not get additional votes because he was a good guy. You know why? You know why that's not meted out over multiple players? It's because we don't know what these guys are really like. We don't. So if you're going to try and ding them, but you can't put it in the opposite direction and lift up the ones who are good guys, the morals clause should be abolished. Period. I always looked at my vote.
Here's
like, no, go ahead, Max, by all means.
No, I was going to say, to your point, Kennesaw Mountain Landis is in the Hall of Fame. He's in the Hall of Fame. He erects a morals clause and makes the color line and is in the Hall of Fame. Max. So of course it's absurd. And by the way, listen, whatever you think of Curt Schilling, the person,
he passed the character test,
the player,
clearly.
And by the way, Schilling has said he doesn't believe he's a Hall of Famer. Curt, you're wrong. You should be a Hall of Famer. But Schilling has said, I don't think I'm a Hall of Famer. He wants the Veterans Committee to vote on him because he would respect it more coming basically from his peers, from other players. He's right. If the voters haven't seen enough to put Curt Schilling in the Hall of Fame, he's right about that. He should respect it more from people who he played against.
Jeff, before I go on this mini soliloquy, let me correct me. I'm pretty sure of it, but I want to make sure that I'm correct with you. We're talking about the writers who have not voted him in. Is that correct?
That's correct. He's going to be going, if he's on the ballot next year, which, by the way, I think he's going to be. He's going to be in his 10th and final year.
Right. Yeah, it's ridiculous. 10 times and all of this stuff. This is ridiculous. Let me say this. I am an advocate of Pete Rose being in the Hall of Fame. People have been against me about that. I'm an advocate of Barry Bonds being in the Hall of Fame because he was a Hall of Famer before steroids came into play. I'm suspect on Mark McGwire since everything is predicated on home runs, okay? And obviously that's what you did. It damn sure was a batting average while Mark McGwire would get in. But a Pete Rose or Barry Bonds, most definitely. Having said all of that, let me make sure everybody understands this. As a journalist for the last 27 years plus, Jeff, you know this, I know this. There are journalists with low character. Drunks, you understand? Folks that use drugs, folks that don't know how to act in their personal life, and you get to dictate or really enforce a morals clause? And the Judge Landis, he's in the Hall of Fame when he was omitting and ostracizing blacks from participating in the damn sport. He's a Hall of Famer. It all the way around. You have participants in the sport and you have individuals who were covering the sport who have very questionable characters. So I don't blame Curt Schilling one bit for saying he'll respect it more from his peers. Because, damn it, there's some questionable people in the Writers Association that's voting. Let's just call it what it is.
No question. I totally understand where he's coming from. The guy who kept black people out of baseball is in the Hall of Fame. That's all we need to know. All right, we'll leave it there. Jeff, always good to talk to you. Thank you for being with us, bringing the energy as always. When we come back here on First Take, a little NFL to dive into. This will be Tom Brady's 10th Super Bowl in his Hall of Fame career. But is it the most impressive run? Max is going to make fans angry. Aaron Rodgers says he thinks he will be back with the Packers, so why do his comments have Stephen A. all sorts of fired up this morning? First Take, just getting started.
I just want to be a legend. People know my name.